Do you have a desire to build wealth? Of course you do. What if I told you that the old saying, you can't beat the market, is complete BS? I don't just show you where, but how to be a contrarian investor and hit your investing goals out of the park.
Unless you've been living under a rock, if you invest in uranium stocks, you have noticed something, which is something's happening in the Athabasca Basin right now. And if you want to better capture what's happening in 2024 in uranium land, exploration companies, then may I suggest this is the best strategy to play the basin. So you might have seen that Canalaska came out with some very impressive results as of late. And with those results, you kind of only had two options. You were either positioned in the stock beforehand, or you had to chase it. So let me just show you briefly what would have done had you chased the stock price going up. Take a look at this baby. On the 28th of February, this is what happened. And by the way, kudos to Corey and the guys for, keeping this a secret, because whenever the news came out, like, you could see that due to volume and price, this was, the market was completely surprised by this. And it ran up, gapped up all the way to 70, a high of 75 cents, down from, let's see, about 42 here, ran all the way up, and it's been trading sideways ever since. Now, unless you were holding the stock previously, then you're still kind of flat, even though the discovery that they made is actually really, really, really high grade. You could argue that, maybe it's too deep, and will it or won't it be mined? Those are questions for a much, much later date. But we're talking here, let's see what the showings are. 16.8 meters of 13.75%. That is painfully high grade uranium. So may I suggest to you that what happened to Canalaska is likely not the end of this drilling season, and that the best way to play it is not to go all in on any one particular company, but to maybe spread your bets. So this is the strategy that I would like to suggest to you as something to consider. It's not financial advice, and I am very biased. You should always assume that I have a holding in the companies that I mentioned, and two of these companies are actually marketing partners of mine. However, it's still a really good strategy, because had you had a small foothold in Canalaska, as it ran up, you would have had the time and the profits to look at the results more calmly and decide whether it deserves putting more money into it or holding back. That would have been a much more comfortable position to be in. Now, let's jump into the three companies that I think you should seriously consider taking a part of your portfolio that's more risky, a part of your portfolio that you'd be willing to lose all of it completely and still be okay. So we're talking, the YOLO money part of the portfolio, not the bread and butter. This is not, the chemicals, Kazatomproms and Denisons of this world. So let's take a look at these three companies and why I think you should consider getting a starter position in them, so that you may not have to chase. And why I think that they're going to be coming out with some really positive news. Can't promise it, but it's really looking like it. But most importantly, why do I think that this is important in 2024? Well, what most people don't realize is that, this being the Athabasca Basin here, this is not just about the potential of the Athabasca Basin and being really high grade, but you have to remember that the Athabasca Basin is a really difficult place to work in. It's expensive to drill, and the grades are so high that you could be standing right beside a really high grade deposit and miss it. You could completely miss it by 15 meters. And the fact that these guys are here and are going to be mentioned is because, first of all, they all have some serious teams behind them. Always remember that when it comes to junior mining, there are 3 levels of what we call the team. There is the management team, which is CO, CFO, GEO, etc., VP exploration, whatever. Then there is the board, right? The people who make the decision of who the CEO is going to be in the first place and how they're going to direct the company. But then there's the 3rd level of financial backers and advisors. And mostly it's the financial backers that really decide what goes on in the company. And so when you're taking a look at all of these 3 companies, please take a look at who's behind them. And you're going to see that it is a Hall of Fame roster of a bunch of guys that were involved in one way or another of NextGen and ISO Energy and Denison and a bunch of other companies and discoveries that have actually returned multiple times what was invested in them at the time. So do bear that in mind, the 3 levels of team. And obviously, the second thing is, what are the real odds of these companies really hitting something out of the park in 2024? Well, in 2024, we're looking at the first year where there's really a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff happening in the Athabasca Basin, because finally some money is being poured into uranium in general, and some of it is trickling down to exploration plays. This is probably not the highest we're going to see, but this is the first year where I can say, you know what? Exploration is coming back to the basin, and it's coming back with vengeance. Meaning, when you take a look at the different companies represented here, and I don't know how up to date this map is, but you can see that a lot of the basin has been taken up. Even the north, which was kind of forgotten by a lot of companies, has some really interesting prospects here. Well, it's close to Uranium City, so you could probably guess that there is some interesting uranium showings here. But let's take a look at the 3 companies that I think are going to provide lots of news flow in 2024, because guess what? They're already out there and they're already drilling. So first of all is Stallion Uranium. I do have a partnership with them and I am a shareholder. And they are currently drilling 3,300 meters in the Appaloosa target. Now, the Appaloosa target is a target within, I'll show you here. It's on the western side of the basin, so it would be closer to, the NextGen discovery, fission, and also F3. Let me see if I can actually narrow it down to just their part here. Aha, there it is. So Coffer is the actual project, and the Appaloosa target is within this project here. Okay, which is fairly close to a lot of really interesting discoveries and deposits. It's right up close to Shea Creek, which belonged to Orano, and I believe now it's UEC's project. It is very deep, but enough high grade that makes for a very interesting project. So much so it has been acquired, and so it's something that Stalin already knows about, and these guys are apparently, now we're going to see this with a drill bit, right? There's nothing like going out there and actually drilling, but what these guys seem to be really strong at is the use of modern technology in order to narrow down on where in the world to drill, because you don't get many shots in the Athabasca Basin. And so you need to have a lot of technical knowledge of the basin, of the western side of the basin, if needed. And they have just come out today and said that actually they are strengthening their board with a former next gen guy who I believe was, I might be off, but I believe he was very, very crucial in the delineation of exploring Arrow as a deposit, you know, as a former next gen guy. So you hear things here and there about the story of how it was actually discovered. Obviously, everybody has a different version of it, but I believe that Matthew Schwab had, you know, a big say in what was drilled in next gen and the discovery that was made there. So really good addition to the team. And Stalin Uranium is a newer company. They own a lot of land in what could be considered, I would say, the sexiest place in the Athabasca Basin, because that's where all the modern day discoveries have been made, except for maybe one or two, which would be on the western side of the basin. So Stalin Uranium, go check them out. Very much worth your time. And they are going to be putting out news about this, I believe, very soon. And you can take a look at the geophysics and all that they're doing with their other projects as well. One of them is option to ATHA, which is super interesting. And there's some preliminary and geophysics being done on other projects as well. So next up is COSA Resources. COSA is also drilling in the Athabasca Basin, but they're drilling in the eastern side of the basin, the Ursa Uranium Project. Now, we go back here to the map, you're going to see that, you know, the next gens and fissions are here to this side, but you also have the actual mines, which are, you know, towards this side here, towards the eastern side. So with COSA specifically, what they have is they've identified, I guess, a corridor here where there is some uranium, but all that has been drilled has been very, very little. And it deserves going back to, and like I said, just like Stalin is doing right now, using more modern exploration devices, I guess, for lack of a better word, or technology, and having a second go at these projects. Also a new company with a very, very technical team that really knows their stuff. And so what they're looking at here is this is one of the trends that doesn't yet have the super high grade uranium, as with pretty much all the other deposits and findings of uranium in the Athabasca Basin. I believe they're onto something, and I believe that it deserves your attention. And the technical team behind it makes it unignorable. Unignorable, that's the word. That is the word that we're going for right now. So early March, they announced, you know, that they're going to be drilling Ursa here for also 3,000 meters. So good luck to the team. I hope to be hearing from them very soon on that. And then finally, we have Sky Harbor Resources. Now, Sky Harbor Resources is super interesting. They are a marketing partner of mine, and I do own shares in Sky Harbor. One of the things that I really like about them is that their business model is a bit different. So they are essentially a project generator, and a project generator has a lot of projects and vends it out, does JV, etc., to most projects, but then they keep the best ones to themselves. And I think that they might be onto something here with their two flagship projects on Lake Cosa, the eastern side of the basin. So let's see what Sky Harbor is doing right here, right now. End of January, I think it was, they announced the start of drilling for the winter campaign at Russell Lake and more uranium projects. Now, there has been some uranium found in both projects, super high grade at Moore. And I really do think it deserves you taking a deeper look at those two projects, their location, how close they are to basically Denison mines deposits. And they're also drilling 3,000 meters at Moore, but they're also drilling 5,000 meters to in Russell Lake. Okay, so that's 8,000 altogether, split into those two main projects. Now, the cool thing about Sky Harbor is they have a bunch of different projects. Let's take a look. Look at this. They're everywhere. So you have all these different projects, some of which are being drilled right now, some of which will be drilled throughout the year, providing us with plenty of news flow. And we have here Moore and Russell Lake, which are right up against Denison Mines. Really juicy, high grade projects. Now, so much so that what's interesting is that in the last couple of days, their partner came out with, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, their partner came out with a piece of news that I thought was very encouraging. So one thing that we have to understand is that whenever a company goes into the basin and they drill it, it's very, very rare that they hit it out of the park from their maiden drilling campaign. That's not normal. So it's important to have some exposure to, a company that's going to be drilling in the winter, that's going to be taking a look at those results and has the capability of coming back in the summer to do some more drilling. These three companies are very well backed. And because of that, I believe that all three of them can come back should they find something really interesting. Now, with Sky Harbor, their partner, their JV partner, who's drilling the Falcon project, which is a company that I'm almost sure you've never heard of, came out and they already seem to be finding radioactive material on their first drilling campaign in the Athabasca Basin. This may not mean very much to you, but to me, it means a lot. It usually takes several goes at a project in order to find something of value. And so let's take a look at this. The name of the company is North Shore Uranium. And North Shore Uranium, I believe, is a $5 million market cap. They went out there and drilled at the Falcon property, and they've already found, some radioactivity, which is surprising. We're not talking about CPS that completely breaks the machines and goes, off the radar or anything like that. But, it's something. There is some level of radioactivity here. There is some likely some uranium that has been found. And they've also found graphite, which is a great indication of more interesting things in the basin. And these guys are going to be putting out news all year long from themselves and from their partners. So one way to play the Athabasca Basin is to consider Sky Harbor, because you're going to be exposed to a lot of different companies, from North Shore, brand new and very small, to Rio Tinto, to anything in between in their JV partners. So that's how I think one should play the Athabasca Basin. Take a little bit of your portfolio, maybe, a part that you'd be willing to part with, quite literally, and put a vote towards what you think is the most mathematically likely to happen. You have companies that have already made discoveries like F3, and I really like what they found so far, but all eyes are already on them. If you want to get exposure to the possible new discoveries of this year, then I would take a look at these three companies for sure, and maybe try to get such a small exposure that it doesn't really break the bank if you lose it all. However, if they do hit something, guess what? You're going to be positioned already. And being positioned and having the ability and the luxury of taking a look at the results, being able to read it, calmly assess the situation, decide whether you want to deploy more at that point, it's a much better position than chasing it. Trust me, every time I tried to chase a stock, except for once, it has not worked out. And the once that I did it was not a discovery. It was a transformational kind of deal. It was an asset purchase in a sense. But yeah, for discoveries, the moment that the news is out, you are competing with people who are faster at buying stock than you, some of which already knew the results beforehand. So be careful with that as well. So that's my idea. That's my strategy for playing the Athabasca Basin. How are you playing the Athabasca Basin? Please post down here below how you're going to do it, or how you're already doing that. And if you'd like to know a bit more information, a little bit of a deeper dive into one of these companies that I think is really going to do some really great things, take a look at this video.